Hello and well met. This is Laborin with the Fancy Grounds Academy. I am going to go over some animated maps and tokens. I think this is something that you might progress to after you start using Fantasy Grounds for a while. And by the way, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. So we kind of go over this. I do this at least once a year. I think it needs to be revisited occasionally. And some of the things that you need to know up front in case you are going to go this route is that most of the assets that you'll find beyond Fantasy Grounds, so like third party, such as on the Roll20 store, or maybe you have a patron that you subscribe to that makes animated spell tokens, or animated maps. Generally, not always, but generally those have to be converted. And the reason for that is that the Unity game engine, which is what Fantasy Grounds is built upon, relies on the virtual codec, the VP8 codec. And most of the assets that are out there currently were made for Foundry, and those are supported in the VP9 format. There's a little bit of difference between the formatting. VP8 is obviously an older format. VP9 is newer. VP9 format is smaller in size, but it taxes your GPU a little bit heavier, whereas a VP8 file is bigger, but it taxes your video memory less. It kind of uses your CPU more to process. So there's some trade-offs on the format, but as far as Fantasy Grounds goes, you can only use VP8 file format. So I'm going to go and bring up a file that I've downloaded from one of my patrons. So I have a different varieties of map here. So there's a city gate with snow that's gridded for daytime. And then there's a non-gridded one, and then there's a nighttime version. I'm going to use the daytime one because in Fantasy Grounds you can set whether it's day or night, so I'd prefer to start with a daytime one. And usually I would like one that doesn't have a grid, just in case it doesn't line up or something. So I'm going to open up this preview file, and I notice it has sound, which is cool, but Fantasy Grounds doesn't support sound in videos like this. So this is actually a short video loop, essentially what this is. So this also adds to the file size of this particular file. And in most cases, the Fantasy Grounds developer portal on the Atlassian guide, it basically suggests that you only use VP8 file format, but also smaller size. So that could be a problem. So we need to take that out, the audio as well, because some of the maps do come with audio. And if you have something like Foundry, it would support it, but not necessarily in Fantasy Grounds because of the formatting and such. So there is a kind of a limitation there. It has to do with the Unity game engine. It only supports VP8. And just by hovering over this file, let's see what I got here. So looking at this, it is an MP4, which is not a supported format. It's 123 megabytes. It's 60 frames per second, and there's some audio attached to it. So we need to change that in order to use this in Fantasy Grounds. So this is something that you'll have to deal with if you're going to be using third-party assets outside of Fantasy Grounds. So what I'm going to do is bring up the Shutter encoder. So this is a really lightweight, free utility for converting different video formats. You can do batch files. I mean, it's pretty amazing for how light it is. So there are other options out there like Handbrake and all those sort of things, but they're a little bit older, and I think they're a little clunkier. I think that this is one of the better options. Some people like the FMEG command line version, but this is actually supported on Linux, Mac, and PC. So it's not a bad application. So I'm going to take this file, drag and drop it into the Shutter encoder, which is going to basically decode it and then re-encode it into a VP8 format. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to click down this drop down, and I'll select VP8, which is basically the format that I want to convert this to. And you can see there's some audio. So what I want to do is take this and the bit rate and all that stuff. I want to go to audio settings, and I'm just going to say no audio whatsoever. So that's going to strip the audio out. I don't need audio. That's not even going to work in Fantasy Grounds. Sometimes it even gets to the point where the audio, since it's not supported, is not going to correctly display or even show anything in Fantasy Grounds. So you got to strip the audio out. The other thing is the source. I wouldn't mess with this too much, but if you were going to, you can change this resolution here. I wouldn't go any higher than probably this 3840 by 2160. So that's like a 4K version. Actually, I'd probably go down to like more like a 2K version, which is this 2560 by 1440. Now, if you mess with this too much, it stretches the image out and it may not line up with your, it may not look good. So you got to be careful of messing around with the aspect ratio. You can also cut it in half, whatever. But I'd like to look at the, so this is a 16 by 9, basically this. It's at 1920 by 1080, so I wouldn't mess with it. That's fine where it is. But if you had one that was a higher resolution, like 4K, you can adjust it down. But I wouldn't scale. It says do not upscale lower resolution. So that's something that I would probably make sure to enforce because it messes with the format. It does something to it. If you're going to be doing tokens, which I'll show next, you want to also make sure that that you have the correct type of transparency. So there is an option. I have to wait till I see that, but basically it's an image option which allows you to under advanced features, and I think it's enable alpha channel, but you only do that with tokens that have a clear background. So I'm going to go ahead and process this now. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here. I'm going to move this over, and down here I'm going to hit start function. Now you can do this in batches, but I recommend maybe only doing 5 to 10 at a time because it can tie up your computer for a long time. So if you've got a whole bunch of them to do and you want to do them in batches, I just run them maybe 10, 20 at a time. That way, if you have errors, that sort of stuff, you can check that and check out what's going on. Because once in a while, the files will be corrupted. So when you download them, sometimes you don't get the full file, or whoever rendered it did it in a weird format. So you'll get that occasionally, depending on where your source is. So we'll see if this is actually going to convert. Okay, so I believe this is the one now, and this is now webm 60 megabytes. And that's a little bit better as far as the conversion goes. It is a little bit big because I think it's a long video, so the loop is kind of long. So they recommend that you only use 10 for your games. So when you send that to your players, it doesn't take as long to transfer the map over. I'm going to just check this out in Fantasy Grounds. I don't have any players connected, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you're going to have a bunch of people playing and you're sending those large video files out, that could be problematic depending on the player's computer. So the main thing is how much of the image is displayed on any given computer. So it isn't just the file size, the formatting. It's also to do with how many pixels are being displayed. And that's really heavy on your GPU or your CPU. And if you have an older laptop with integrated graphics, it's really hard on those, especially if you don't have more than 16 RAM. It can really bog things down. So keep that in mind for your players. So even though it looks good on your machine, when you're sending this stuff across, it may not work out for them. So just kind of give you a heads up on that. Or it may be really slow, laggy, some kind of problem. So anyways, once you convert this over, now I'm going to copy this and put it into my Fantasy Grounds directory. So I'm going to copy the image, which is now webm, and it's in the proper format. I'm going to go ahead and close the conversion tool. And in library, I'm going to go to assets, and this is where you store all your images, maps, tokens, things like that. and I'm going to go to Images, and I want to click on Folder, and that's going to basically it'll create a subfolder within your campaign. And I'm going to make my own subfolder here, so I'm going to call this animated maps, something like that. And then in here, I'm going to hit Control V, and that's going to create paste the file in there. So like I said, that file size is a little bit big because it's probably almost a 1 minute loop or 30 seconds. For the maps here, what I'm going to do is kind of modify the file name because I have a naming convention that I use, and I would like to kind of keep that format. So I'm trying to kind of like rename it so that when I go to look for it, I can find it easier. And it also arranges itself in the assets window a lot nicer. So once you have your files in there, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And you want to hit this refresh folder assets. And now you'll see a campaign folder. So that won't be there until you start adding content to your campaign folder. So go ahead and click this, go to animated maps, and a good sign is that you're getting a preview. If you just see a white or black blob or empty space there with the file name, more than likely it's corrupt or it's not formatted properly for Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to click this. So this is the preview image. And then if you want to add it to your campaign, all you have to do is click on create map record. So I'm going to actually come over here to the images area. And what I want to do is create a new category. And I'm going to call this Snowy Encounter because this is what I'm building towards. Tomorrow I'm going to do a kind of like a combat, I think, if I have time, because I'm not going to have dinner until like 8 o'clock at night. So basically, I got the full day of Christmas free. I'm going to do a combat with the Yeti actually you're going to do Krampus versus the Grinch. So I'm going to do something like that. But this is kind of like the setup for it, but also showing how you convert the assets. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Snowy Encounter. That's what I'm going to call this group or this new section I'm making. And I'm going to select that in the drop-down menu. And then when I add my custom content, it's going to go in this section. So create map record. And there we go. So this is now in Fantasy Grounds in my campaign. And I've added it as an asset. And I can still see the movement. So I don't know if this is worth adding this big file because you can actually just take a flat map and put some Fantasy Grounds animation assets on top of it without having to have this big file. So you got to kind of pick your battles on these. So this may not be worth it depending on what you're trying to do. But I'm just doing this for the sake of conversion. So you got these flags moving. So you can see a little bit of wind movement. You can see a couple drops of snow. You have your walls in here. And you have all these details that you wouldn't normally see. There's a little bit of flickering and some animated fire here. But you can do all that in Fantasy Grounds without having to have this. So unless the map is very unique or custom, you probably don't even need animated map. But just to let you know, it is supported. So I'm going to turn on the grid. I'm going to see how this looks. So it's not lined up at all, which is what I suspected. So my guess, it's either 70 or 140, something like that, as far as the supported size. It might be a little less, might be a little more. But this is basically the kind of thing that you're going to have to go through if you don't know the actual dimensions. So when you get these from your like from your patrons or from the stores, you want to look and see what the ratio is for this material. So if you're not sure, there's one way you can kind of get close. So I'm going to turn off the grid, or at least get rid of it. So I can right click on the image, go to layers, and turn the grid off. And then what I'll do is I'll stretch and drag a custom one to kind of get close to the scale, because I want to have something this is probably like 30 feet wide or something like that. So what I'll do is I'll use this for reference, and try to get closer to the scale. So again, right click, go to layers, and we're going to set the grid. And what I'm going to do is use something on here like the vertices or some kind of section here to give me some reference. So I'm going to come like here in the center, left click and drag, and I think that's pretty close. So yeah, that's 75. So that makes sense in regards to, I think it's 72 is where it's at. So that's that. And then what you can do is play around with where it lines up. But that's why I use maps that don't have a grid. So I can technically just use this instead. So it's probably 70, 72, or 74, somewhere in there. Let me try 74. That should be a little closer. Yeah, so this is a lot closer to what I would hope. And then you can take and move this over. Yeah, so that's pretty close. I mean, you're not going to get much better than that. You can move this stuff as you see fit, but that's close enough. You don't have to be dead nuts or perfect. It just helps to know, though, if this is actually going to line up on the side. So you can also use a corner of a map or an image to help you with that. So I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to go to layers. I'm going to erase that. And then I'll use the corner of the map to kind of give me an idea of where I want to draw the grid. So go back to layers, go to set grid. And the reason I'm doing this, because you may have to do this yourself at some point. Yeah, so pretty close right there. So again, that's 44. So that kind of makes this map a little bit larger because of the amount of amount of space and such that you're using. But that's really close. I mean, I don't see any other. That could be the actual the dimensions because of the size of the map. Yeah, it's pretty close. So you can decide how you want to do it. But in this case, I don't like the white grayed out grid, so I'm going to go ahead and put like a kind of like a bluish one, turn it down a little bit. So now we kind of have a theme grid, and it's also not as bright or as ugly. And then what you'll do is, if applicable, like since these are doorways and stuff, you can start adding in your line of sight, your walls, that sort of thing. So if you wanted to do that on this map here, you can go to the line of sight tool and start tracing around in these areas to give you the line of sight. So I'll just use a rectangle tool. I think that's probably the easiest. And now I'm just going to line this up. Let's see, left click and drag. And that's close enough. So you do something like that, and then maybe this is a window and this would be your door. So you can come over here to the door frame, and I'm just going to continue with the rectangle tool. And I want to turn on the navigation button so I can actually scoot the map around without having to adjust the screen. So we'll do that. And now I'm going back up to the door frame, rectangle, and I'm just going to left click and drag. So here's the door. And then this over here will be a window. So I'll switch over to Windows mode and do something like that. So this isometric top-down view is kind of hard to deal with, but that's basically what you're going to be stuck with on some of these 3D animated maps that look like this. So that looks kind of like, what was that, Tailspire or Dungeon something rather, whatever that is from Steam. It kind of reminds me of that. I do like the little bits of snow, but if you wanted to increase that, you can use a Fantasy Grounds effect, which is probably about the same in regards to using an animated video as opposed to using an effects layer. So I don't know which one's going to take more memory or resources, but if you have to, I'd only use 1 or 2 effects for Fantasy Grounds. I wouldn't use too many, because that can also create some lag, some issues for your players. So there's the blizzard. I don't think I want that. Let's just go with regular snow. So we're just gonna bring up the intensity a little bit, turn the speed down so it's not coming down too hard, and then turn the size down. So that looks pretty cool. And then maybe for the amount, just kind of turn it down a little bit so you can still see without, breaking the immersion and still be able to see everything. Now when you go into play mode, then you'll have this really nice snowy kind of scene here. And it already had snow, so it kind of adds to it, I guess. It might be a little overkill too, so it depends on what you're trying to do. It says map, city, gate, HD, snowy day, so I might just say city gate up here. And when I share this image, that's what's going to actually display. So I turned off the identified. So you don't want to show them the file name or if this says boss layer. So we want this to just basically show Citygate when we share the image to the players. So then you could add other assets, like that snow is probably good enough for effects. But if you wanted to add other things in here, that would give you that kind of that extra immersion. You could. There's some snow assets in the Fantasy Grounds catalog if you have the art subscription. Now it's not going to look exactly like this, but it'll be close. And I think honestly, it would probably be a lot less burden on your system. But nonetheless, this is kind of going over the third-party stuff that you might incorporate into your game. So I think this is where most people get pissed off, is because they get all this stuff and then they go, oh crap, I got to convert it, and then they got to set it up too. So it can be annoying for sure, and that's kind of why I'm going through this. So you pick a good, reputable third-party, animated map maker or token maker. Figure out what scale they use, what format of the files, and then from there decide if you're going to convert them, that sort of thing. So now I want to go and I'm going to get a Yeti token. So I'm going to go back into my downloads folder, and I do have a folder with a bunch of assets from Benios assets. So these are our game assets. There's items, spells, and tokens. So I'm going to go to tokens, and here's the Yeti. Now this has different poses and different file formats. So these are all webm, webp. So for instance, this is a short little, this is like a token that you can use if you want to do a more of a flat one. And then there's this one, which has no ring. So you could use that image as like put some snow on it and use that as a potential way to freak your players out. Like push that to them. Here's a preview of the image with full rendering and snow and such. That would just be for so you can see what it's going to look like. And then there's an ISO version. So this is like a kind of like what you would use for the side view. So if you're going to use the map and you're going to use it in the 3D model, that might be the pose you want. And that's also a video file. So if you come over here, it's got movement on it, so you can use it for an asset if you wanted to. And then over here, top down, you also have top down view. So if you want to use like a top down token, so here's a special, so you can see him attacking with the snow and everything on it. So when you go to put these in Fantasy Grounds, sometimes they don't have the background cut out, depending on what format it starts with. So we'll try it without the background first, and I think I'm just going to use this walking one. So I'm going to take this. Actually, I'll do both of these, and we'll see if they work just out of the box, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Depends on how they were made. So I'm going to go to copy, and in Fantasy Grounds, I'm going to go ahead and shortcut this map so I don't lose it. And we're going to go to assets, and this time tokens. And I'm going to click on the folder, and that'll create a tokens folder in your campaign. So I want to make a new subfolder. We're going to call this animated tokens. and then I'll paste those in here and we'll see if they'll work. Okay, so those are two different views, so we'll see how this stuff looks. Whenever you add, change file names, move stuff around, you got to hit this refresh, and you'll get your campaign folder, and see these are black, completely nothing. So this is what I was saying, you have to convert these. So I'm going to go back into the folder. I'm out here, and I'm going to convert these over. Let me see, these are webm, but they're VP9. So you got to convert these to VP8, and you want to make sure that the transparency is preserved. So I'm going to bring up the shutter encoder again, which is what I use for the map. And it's pretty thorough. So I'm going to do both of these just in case. And then what I want to do is choose the function output. So we want VP8, because right now they're VP9. Let's see, what else? I want to go to advanced features and make sure enable alpha channel. So that's this clear area around here. If you don't, you're going to get this black or white background. I'm going to do the same thing with this other one. Enable alpha channel, yep. And now I want to check audio. So do we have any audio? Yes, there's an audio channel. So even though it's silent, there's no audio, there's still an audio channel. So I want to make sure that's not in there either, because that can throw off the detection of it won't be compatible. So both of them, no audio. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit start function, and it's going to convert both of those into a more of a compatible format. And this is the stuff you're going to be going through if you're going to use a bunch of third-party stuff. So if you have a Fantasy Grounds art subscription, it may not have all the things you want, but at least you don't have to do all this. If you want to get some really cool stuff, you're going to have to put a little work into it like this and go ahead and, convert it and, do that kind of stuff. So these VP9 files, I'm getting rid of those. So I'm going to delete those. And these now are VP8. And I'm going to go ahead and change the titles. It's very important to do this in the beginning. So token underscore Yeti underscore 01. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So, hey, how's it going? Happy holidays, folks. Yeti underscore 02. So there's different poses. And that's important to get in the habit of doing that. Don't wait till the end when you got a million files. Do it as you go. Because I do videos on this stuff all the time, and what I end up doing is I'll dig around looking for it and have a hell of a time figuring out what I did with it, what the file names were called. That's when you start slowing things down, and it adds more to your prep time and all kinds of stuff. So make yourself useful to yourself. Now you see these are the ones that weren't compatible. They're just blank. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and now they'll show up. And that's because they're in the proper format. And it's very important that you do that. So now I have two poses. What I'm going to do is go to my NPCs. I've already worked on this. This is a Greater Yeti. And I don't have the art set up yet. So what I'll do is click on this, unlock it first, and then go to pictures. And then what I'll do is I'll start replacing some of this stuff. So what I'll do is for my top-down flat thing, I'll use this. There's my token. If I wanted a camera token, I would use that ISO format because that actually shows a side view. So let me see if I can grab that. So this is the top-down view, and this is a still. Let me look at this didn't work right. That's right. So let me see face. So you can do something like that too if you don't want a full thing. But I wanted the ISO view. Yeah, so I have to convert this one as well. So again, you use the shutter encoder, and these are the steps. I want to make sure you understand what's going on here. So this is in a VP9 format. So even though it's WebM, it's the wrong codec. So if I highlight this, yeah, VP9. So that's not going to work with Fantasy Grounds. It'll work in Foundry and such, but not Fantasy Grounds. Now, that's because of the Unity engine, not just because of Fantasy Grounds. So here's the VP8 now. That's what I'm going to be doing. Again, I want to make sure there's no audio. So go to Audio Settings, and I'm going to select No Audio, because that throws it off too. It also makes the file size bigger when you don't need it. And then also, Advanced Features, I want to preserve the alpha channel or enable the alpha channel. Otherwise, you're going to get a white or a black background. You don't want that necessarily. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Start Function, and that's going to convert it, hopefully. And now we have a kind of an isometric side view type thing. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to open up the folder on the back end and go to the animated tokens and just go ahead and hit paste in there. And then I'm going to make this TKN underscore. Actually, I have another one for this, 3D underscore Yeti underscore 01. I can't stress how important that is, because you start. My Christmas wish is I hope they add an NPC Dropbox or list option for traits and attacks when building NPCs. What rule set are you? Is it 5e or Pathfinder? There isn't going. I don't think they're going to do that, but I think what they're moving towards is to automate that, so you don't have to do any of those. Okay, yeah. So that's, I use what do you call it? I'm using Notebook LM, and I'm using ChatGPT, and it does pretty good with the import tool. So that's how I made the Yeti. Is actually this Yeti here. I made it with the import tool, and it was pretty quick. If the formatting's correct, you know, you can use that. That's the key there. The formatting has to be right. So here's the side view now, and I refresh the assets, and now I got the side view, so I can use that there. And then if I wanted just a picture to show to the people or my friends or allies, go back to the animated token and see what kind of, oops, that's the wrong folder. Yeah, I think they're going to try to, what's the import tool? The import tool is if you have 5e open and you go to NPCs, down here, this hamburger menu, you can copy and paste text from third-party sources, but the caveat is it has to be, the exact wording has to be correct, the formatting has to be correct, and then you have to have the correct filter. So depending on the source, like the 2022 Monsters of the Multiverse is probably mostly legacy stuff. The 2024 D&D Beyond matches anything on the website that, you know, that there, and then the core books would be something that I think Fantasy Grounds gets those in a different format, so we wouldn't have access to those. But basically, you have to pick the correct filter depending on the content and your source. And once you do that, when you copy and paste and you hit import, it just populates all the fields. However, the thing is that the text itself has to be right. Like if you copy and paste it and one little period is wrong, or you got, you know, too many spaces or whatever, it'll drive you nuts. I did a whole article on just that, because that's really where the work is. That's the annoying part. You got this really nice tool, but if you don't know how to use it, or you're not certain on how it the challenges and around it's going to piss you off. So I try to work, basically when I have a challenge like that, can you do multiple? It's one at a time, unfortunately. You can't do a batch. That would be nice, but no. I think it would cause more headaches because you'd have to look at each one of them anyway, so I don't know how it would work. But basically what I was doing is with ChatGPT, I give it an example, and then I just, you know, I give it, let's see, here we go. So like this is the stat block, and this is the exact format that I would be using. So copy and paste that into the import tool, and this usually works out pretty good. It once in a while it breaks or it doesn't do it right, but once you give it the correct text format, and it like this is the newer format right here. This is what's normally wrong with stat blocks. They usually don't have the right formation of the text. Usually it'll be all in one string or whatever. So it kind of depends on the source and your input. But then also what goes wrong is like this candy cane strike. You have to have a period after there. Sometimes you'll have a semicolon. Sometimes it'll be a hyphen. You know, there's all kinds of formatting variances between sources. So that's where the stuff gets really annoying. But that's how I've been doing it lately. And then I also have Notebook LM, which is even better. It has actual source files in there that I can query and all kinds of stuff. But back to this thing with the Yeti. So I wanted to. So I'm starting to get off topic here, but yeah, that's how the import tool works. And then you have to assign the artwork. So even if you can do batches, you still have to go back and put in tokens if you're going to use tokens. So let's see, what else do we have? So I wanted to, oh yeah, I want to go to downloads. Okay, so downloads. Okay, here's Benno's assets. One back there. Go to tokens, Yeti. Okay, so I think there is a face. It was an idle face. I think we can use this as the kind of like a picture or something. Yeah, that's not exactly what I wanted. That's just like a token or a pog. I wanted more like an artistic look. Let's see what this one looks like. Yeah, that's the animated. So you can either come up with your own or just use that same 3D one. So I didn't have a really good, let's look at this. Nope, that's top down. So I could take this image here and make a, use this and convert it into an image file and then place a background on it or whatever, but I'm not going to worry about that. So what I'm going to do instead of worrying about that is just take this image and use that. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Oop, it's just going to use that one. Whatever, doesn't matter. But this would be like your, like if you had like a portrait or something. So I do have some Yeti pictures that I could probably swap out, but I'll use a pose from that other one and make like a face or something like that. But anyways, so that's that. Now what I want to do is lock this, put it on the combat tracker, change the visibility, I'm going to turn it on, go back to my fancy map here that I was working with, and let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to drag and drop this NPC onto the map. Yep, here we go. So it looks a little bit small. That's because I didn't define it, but that's fine. So this is an animated token. And then if you don't like the way he's walking or whatever, you could change that. But this is basically the gist of it. So you have to convert animated tokens if they're not in the correct format. And quite often it's in VP9. I converted to VP8 and I also made sure there was no audio, and I also preserved the transparency. Otherwise you're going to get white or black down here on the bottom. And then for the map part for this, I converted it from a MP4 to a VP8 video file, and then I stripped the audio out because it actually came with some really cool audio, but you can't. It doesn't work in Fantasy Grounds, or in it's actually Unity, the engine that limits that. So a lot of people complain about that. Well, why can't it do audio? Well, it doesn't support it. And then the other thing that they say a lot is, well, why can't you do multiple monitors? It doesn't really. The engine itself doesn't support Fantasy Grounds, and then that would be a complete rewrite of the application too. So I don't think they're going to do that. Not now. They'd have to start over, pretty much. Let's see. So I think that's what I got for you today. Tomorrow I'm going to do the Grinch and the what is that? The Krampus battle. I'll probably use the same map. I don't think I'm going to use animated tokens. I'm just going to use top-down flat ones. Matter of fact, I was working on some earlier today. Let's see. Downloads. Yeah, so probably use these here. Yeah, I'll use these because I have a Grinch and I have the, yeah, so I'm going to use this for my top down, or, for my pogs. And then the Grinch, I'm going to use this one, I think. Yeah, I'll use that one. So I'm going to use those for the battle tokens. I already have their stat blocks. So I use that import thing I was showing you earlier and the import tool for NPCs. So I already have the stat blocks ready to go. So I have Krampus here, and then I have the Grinch. So both stat blocks are ready to go. Krampus is a little bit more powerful, but the Grinch has poison resistance and immunity to poison, and he's a little bit sneakier. So the Krampus is pretty much straight up, melee. He's a little bit more powerful, like hit points and that sort of thing, and armor class. But the Grinch has more sneakier stuff. He's kind of got like some different things that the other guy doesn't have. So he's more of a stealth based one, and this other guy is more melee, I guess. I'm gonna look at it that way. But these turn out pretty good with using the import tools. You got all the summary back here. I even create some of the lore tactics. So for instance, the Grinch, he's a cunning and reclusive creature known for his mischievous pranks and disdain for the festive cheer of others. Living high in the mountains, he uses his intelligence and charisma to outwit and intimidate those who cross him. Despite his gruff demeanor, the Grinch is capable of unexpected acts of kindness when his heart is warmed. So I think he's going to be on the side of the town where he's going to actually, kind of protect the town. Basically, he's protecting his territory. He doesn't want the Krampus to come in and cramp his style. So tactics. The Grinch prefers to rely on stealth and misdirection, sneaking into enemy territory to steal valuable items or sabotage plans. In combat, he uses his fearful presence to scatter foes and his bag of tricks to distract or confuse. If pressed, he attacks with quick slam strikes and retreats using his sneaky escape. So it even has his appearance. He has a magic bag of holding that has a bunch of like trinkets in it. And then it's kind of gives some harvesting information. So the green fur is rare and exotic, so you can harvest the fur. So that's, in case you have people that like to loot everything. I imagine the Grinch having self-loathe trait, gaining. Yeah, that could be. I could add that probably. He probably does. Let's see. He's got throwing coal, so he can throw hunks of coal. So he has like a missile attack. But this one, the Krampus, he's pretty much badass. Like he can carry twice his weight. He ignores difficult terrain with snow or ice. He's resistant to frost, but so is the Grinch. Bag of holding. He has the bag of holding so he can carry people away. He makes 3 attacks. He's got a bite and 2 claw attacks, or he can do his sticks where he can thump you with his sticks. I was going to add the chain, but I think he's already got enough attacks. And he has a terrifying cackle, which is kind of like frightened. He's just more of a beast. Like he's just got more oomph to him. It's a lot tougher and a lot more hit points. But the other guy has more stealth and speed and such. So we'll see what happens. If I get time tomorrow, I'll do a skirmish between those two. And I made a little portrait poster thingy. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, I made some pictures based off of that concept. So let's see what we got here. What's that? No. Where did I do that? Staff, faculty. Yeah, so this is the poster I made. The Grinch versus Krampus. It's basically just the advertising for it. But I'll post this one later I already did one today. We'll do another one tomorrow. But a lot of people are going to be, you know, I don't know. There are a lot of people are going to be out and about and celebrating Christmas. So, anyways, you guys, happy holidays. I'll see you around either tomorrow or sometime this week. The call back to the movie. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, folks, take care. Happy gaming and take advantage of the winter sale if you haven't already. And some of the resources and the content that I used in this video, I put those in the link. So you go to YouTube afterwards, the links for the Patreon, the tools, you know, I always try to put that stuff in there. I may not include every single little thing.